Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're just going to be chatting about every book that I've read so far this year that I've given 5 stars. I have 12 books to talk to you about today. I've read 125 books so far this year. This is pretty on par for me. I usually read about 120 books in a full year, and I typically have between 10 and 15 5 stars at the end of the year, so this is totally on par, typical reading year for me. My average rating is always exactly the same. I'm trying to find more 5 stars, but I'm just too picky, I think. So these are the books that like really did it for me. I think that's all I need to tell you, so let's go ahead and get started with my list. Okay, so the first book I want to talk to you about, this is so random, 13 Treasures by Michelle Harrison. Okay, I read this when I was in 5th grade, so this was a reread for me. Granted, it's been 12 years since I was in 5th grade, or longer or shorter. I don't know how old you are when you're in 5th grade, but I read this in 5th grade, okay? I was obsessed with this book, and I was kind of feeling slumpy in February, so I was just reading a lot of middle grade because I find that's like a surefire way to get me out of a reading slump, and like one of the only true ways to get me out of a reading slump as well. So I picked this book up on audio, and oh my gosh, I had the most fun time. This book is following our main character, whose name I don't remember, sorry. She goes to stay at her grandmother's estate because she is being tormented by fairies, but her parents can't see the fairies, so she is gifted with a sight. Her parents do not have the sight, and so they think she's just acting out being crazy, so they send her to live with her grandmother in this kind of sprawling, decrepit estate for the summer so she can get her behavior in check. It turns out her grandmother's estate borders on the Fae world, so she's having all of these interactions with these very traditional, kind of boisterous, evil, conniving fairy creatures, and it is so good. This is like for the fantasy girlies that love Fae but don't want a romance in every single book that they read. So that's me. I don't typically love romance and fantasy. I'm not a big romantasy reader, so maybe I just like haven't found my calling yet, but this book is incredible. Honestly, reads more like a young adult than a middle grade. I think you could love it as an adult as well, as evidenced by me. There are actually 2 middle grade books on this list that I'm going to talk to you about, but I actually don't give middle grade 5 stars very often for how much I read it. So anyway, highly recommend this if you're looking for something like what I just described. Also, okay, I have House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher, which is so exciting. This book is a very quirky, silly horror novel, which I love in horror books when there's like dry humor or funny things going on. It reminded me a lot of How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix, so maybe if you're looking for something similar, this could be a good pick for you, or vice versa. If you loved this and you're looking for something else similar, How to Sell a Haunted House. Our main character goes home to visit her mother or stay with her mother. I can't remember the exact reason why, but it's not important. And when she arrives home, she finds that her mother has like severely changed their house and is behaving in a really strange way, and the house itself is strange and perhaps haunted. And the kind of climax of this novel was honestly a little bit ridiculous, but I loved it. This was witty and dry, and I love that in books. I don't necessarily love when books are like trying to be funny, but I love when they have a goofy kind of silly tinge to the writing, or our main character is really witty and dry. That is a theme in common with so many of the books in this stack. I loved this, 5 stars. It was the only 5-star read I had in February other than 13 Treasures. So February was objectively my worst reading month as far as ratings go. I also have First Light Wins by Ashley Easton. Ever since this came out, it's had raving reviews. This book is finally a thriller with a plot twist that I couldn't figure out. Like, I read so many thrillers every single year, and I'm always searching for something new. And this book finally kind of did that for me, and I really appreciated that. I was able to solve kind of one of the mystery twists going on in here, but then I was kind of left in the dark about another one. I love when mysteries or thrillers do that, when they make you feel kind of smart because you can figure out one detail, but then the other detail you're kind of left in the dark about. I think that's such a nice balance. The pacing in this was great. The audiobook narrator did so good with this book. Everything about it, 10 out of 10. And the last audiobook I have to talk to you about is They're Going to Love You by Meg Howry, which I just talked a ton about in my Reading Books with Pretty Covers vlog that went up last weekend. So if you're interested on more full thoughts, go watch that, because I just raved about this book, I think, for like 7 minutes straight in the last clip of that video. This is just a lit fic. We're following this woman. She is a contemporary ballet choreographer in the modern day, and we're kind of following her throughout her life and her childhood and how she kind of arrived at this point, and also her kind of interesting relationship with her father, who is living in New York, separated from her mother. He's gay, and she's kind of been left in the dark because she was a pretty small child when her parents split. So she goes to visit her father and finds out this detail about him right amidst the AIDS crisis. And so she's kind of following how that is also playing into her fears with her father and how their relationship evolved over time, and also her relationship with her mother and how it maybe was not the healthiest thing that could have ever happened. And essentially she's just talking about like her life passions and kind of stream of consciousness thoughts, but this writing was so beautiful and intentional and like one of the best lit fics I've ever read. I put it right up there with Sally Rooney's books. I am ordering myself a physical copy of that because I was just blown away. And now we can talk about the physical books that I have here to discuss with you. Again, in that reading books with pretty covers video, I read Death Valley by Melissa Broder. This is not going to be for everyone, and I'm not sure who I would recommend this to. She talks a lot in here about plants. She's talking about grief. She is a woman who is dealing with the kind of impending death of her father. He is in the hospital and he has been for quite some time. Things are not looking good, and her husband also has a terminal illness. So she kind of goes to take a week-long escape. She stays at a Best Western in kind of the middle of the desert. She goes hiking to think out, feel out her thoughts. She's also a writer. She's working on ideas for writing a book. She's hiking in this desert. She encounters a giant cactus that has kind of a fissure in the side, which she finds out she can enter. So she goes into the cactus and some weird things are happening in there. So magical realism, but also tinged with that really witty, funny, dry humor that I love. I just loved our character's voice. I love the way she told the story, and I can understand for some people it's going to seem random. It's going to seem plotless at times. It's going to seem eccentric maybe, and I understand that that doesn't work for everyone, but this absolutely worked for me, and I would recommend it to anyone that feels like they have a similar reading taste to me, because this did really fun things. It's also very short, like 200 pages. What a win. We also have Anxious People by Frederick Bachman. I know I'm the last girl on the planet to read this. Sorry, I guess, for not hopping on the bandwagon sooner. This book is following a group of people who are viewing an apartment that is for sale. It's it's New Year's Eve. And we're also following a bank robber whose bank robbery goes very wrong, and they end up barging in on this apartment viewing and taking the people hostage, all by accident. And we're also following the detectives that are trying to figure out what happened with this bank robbery, and all of them are bonded and connected in mysterious ways, and they're going to talk it out, and they're all going to learn things about each other, and that's what happens in this. And this is a really goofy story. Like, it's not serious at all, right? But at the same time, it's dealing with very serious, very heavy topics. And Frederick Bachman just has a way with his words, with his prose, that makes you feel everything. Perhaps way more than if another author had written this book. This made me cry. This wasn't a sad book, but I was crying. I'm slowly working my way through his backlist. There's another one of his books on this list as well, but maybe this is your sign to pick it up if you haven't yet, because I've never heard of someone reading a Frederick Bachman and not liking it. Okay, next is We Run the Tides, and this is a very difficult book to talk about because, again, it's kind of just like plotless ramblings of a teenage girl. I saw a 1-star Goodreads review of this book that said something along the lines of, so boring, just 13-year-old girls running around San Francisco being mean to each other. And I couldn't agree more. That's like the perfect description of this plot, but that's why I loved it. Our main character is unlikable. Her friends are unlikable. Everything they're doing is unlikable, but it really is kind of that depiction of like unsupervised youth for the first time. It's a little unhinged, and our main character is different, and she's figuring this out about herself, and she's figuring out that being a teenage girl kind of sucks. And she's just going on like rambling little rants about that, and I loved it. Okay, I also have The Virgin Suicides, which was an absolute shocker to me. I'm doing my best to pick up more modern classics. I want to read Middlesex by this author later this year, and I'm hoping to get into a couple other contemporaries on my shelves that I think are deemed modern classics at this point. This was written in the 90s, and a lot of people hate this, and I think it's because they miss the point. So essentially, we are being told the story by a collective narrator of teenage boys. So it's like a collective we, and these teenage boys are telling us about this house across the street from one of the boys that's involved in this collective narration, where a family with a bunch of daughters lives. And I think the title is pretty self-explanatory for what's happening to these girls, but it's told through this really kind of brutish, piggish, ununderstanding writing style. And that's the point of the book. But a lot of people don't think it is, and they're offended, and they're like, why would a man write this book? Well, the man wrote this book because he's criticizing men writing young women, right? Again, this is kind of plotless, literary. We're just following like ramblings over the years as we watch these girls develop into characters through these boys' eyes. They essentially get everything wrong about these women, but occasionally they stumble onto a sentiment that is correct. It's a little bit funny. I annotated this book, which I rarely do. Even if I give a book 5 stars, I still don't annotate very often. But again, this book is just like slice of life, random narrative events. And there's not really a big like punch in this book. Like, that's not the point of this story, but I thought it was done exquisitely. I had a great time reading this. I recommend that you pick this up, but go in understanding that you're not supposed to like reading this book. It's not supposed to be a fun reading experience for you. I have another thriller on my list, which is crazy. I hardly ever give thrillers 5 stars, but Listen for the Lie by Amy Tintera. I will say Book of the Month has been doing a good job picking their thrillers this year. I'm impressed. This book is following a woman who goes home to her Texas hometown after being away for several years. She is accused of killing her best friend, but they don't have enough evidence to prosecute her, so everyone thinks she did it. She even thinks that she might have done it, but she has no memory of the night, and it's surrounded in a lot of trauma for her. There's a podcaster in the town doing a podcast series on this crime and seeing if he can figure out what really happened. So she's met with a lot of animosity, and she is very sarcastic and just over it with everyone in the town and kind of done caring what people think about her. But she also wants to get to the bottom of this mystery. So we kind of follow these two as they have this warring dynamic because she hates him because she's like, you're making me look like I did it. And he's kind of retorting back, well, don't you want to know if you did it? And so they have this really complex kind of enemies to friends-ish relationship going on in here. And they're going to figure out what happened really 5 years ago, maybe, I think. And I just had so much fun. This was goofy, silly, funny. It had some great twists. So I appreciated this for what it was and what it did. Okay, we have another reread. I reread this book every year, so inevitably I talk about it on my channel every year, and y'all are probably sick to death of hearing me speak about this book, but this is my favorite middle grade of all time. The first time I ever read this was in 4th grade, and I have reread it every single year since. So again, not sure how old I actually am in 4th grade, but I can distinctly picture myself sitting in my 4th grade classroom reading this. So I know it was 4th grade. Lots of years since then. This book is following Minli, and she is living in a rural town somewhere in China. There's a drought, and she decides that she is going to go on an adventure and see if she can change her family's fortune. See if she can bring rain to the valley, or if she can do something to get her family out of where they live. Along the way, she meets a dragon, and what really makes this book incredible is that the author has adapted a ton of Chinese lore into short little stories that fit with the theme of the chapter. This has a lot of really interesting lessons about greed, about fate and luck and family and love and happiness and joy and gratefulness, and I just think that this is like incredible. As a children's book, obviously. Do you see this award? Actually, you probably can't because the lighting's not good. That's a big one, right? This is an important award in children's literature, if not I think one of the most esteemed. Rightfully so, it deserves it. If this sounds good, if you're looking to get over a reading slump, might I recommend reading this because it is super quick. This is a thick book, but I think it takes me like 2 hours to read it whenever I do my reread. There's lots of really beautiful illustrations in here. I just really can't say enough good things about this. So pick it up if you like middle grade, or even if you don't like middle grade, I think you could take a lot away from this. And this also, I think, teaches a lot of important cultural points. Like, this was really my first experience reading a book about anything in China, and it impacted me so positively. So anyway, this is amazing, and I would recommend it to anyone and everyone in the entire world. Okay, we're at my other Frederick Bachman book, which was Beartown. This is the first book I ever read by Frederick Bachman in January. It was my first book of the year, actually, and it was 5 stars. I'm not gonna continue on in the series. Hold on, my cat's eating my plants on my patio. Hey, stop it. I don't think I'm gonna continue on in this series just because this felt very final at the end, and I don't feel that I need to know more about these characters. So maybe if I ever have a time when I have nothing borrowed in Libby and I have space in my holds, I'll put a hold on the second one, but I don't feel that this was meant to be a series. Essentially, we're in a small town. We're following tons of different perspectives. We're following an entire hockey team, all of the people on the board of the hockey team, the directors, the coaches, and then their families as well. So we're getting a ton of different people narrating us this story. This has a lot of dark topics in it, so I would definitely say do your research before you get into this, because there's pretty much every trigger warning you could think of, and I don't think it does a very good job at disclosing that, so maybe just read those if you are sensitive to certain topics being discussed in books. This book had me sobbing for the last 50 pages. It was just a constant stream of tears as I went through all of this. This book made me feel really difficult emotions, and it made me feel angry for most of the book, which is something that books rarely do. I can be irritated with characters, I can be irritated with events, I can be empathetic towards things happening to other characters, but I think this book wrecked my cortisol levels for an entire week because of how angry I was this entire time. And I think that that is an important emotion to experience when reading, because how often do we really get to feel angry when we read something, right? Especially for a prolonged period of time. So I think that's my first real experience feeling so angry for the characters that I've ever had reading a book, and that's why it was so impactful for me. I loved all of the characters, even the unlikable characters, and this book really, really makes you root for one certain girly pop in here, even when she's being awful, right? So this that was a very niche description. I didn't mean to get so into that, but this is good and you should read it, okay? And the last book in this video that we're going to talk about is Migrations. I read this last month, I think, and I talked about it in some video that went up recently, but I don't remember which one. In this book, we are set in present day. I think 2018 is when a large portion of this book is set. But kind of in a dystopian-ish reimagining of the world, where literally every living being that is not humans, any I don't want to say mythical, essentially any animals that are not varmin are extinct or going extinct because the climate crisis in this version of the world is so terrible. This woman is our main character. We're following her, and she is following the migrations of this group of birds that for some reason is very, very important to her, and we don't really understand why this specific group of birds means so much to her or why she has to follow them. She's obviously very clearly grieving something, and there's something very dark, or maybe multiple things that are very dark that have happened in her past that she is struggling with. And we're also following a fishing charter, which she has really conflicting emotions about being on, because they're part of the problem. They're part of the reason why there are no animals left, no fish left, no birds left, no mammals left. But as she goes on this trip with them, because they agree to take her on this route to follow her birds because her birds eat fish, alas, it's a mutually beneficial relationship for everyone involved. Anyway, she learns about the humanity of these people and how maybe they actually don't really stand behind what they're doing. And she goes on an exploration of her emotions. She takes us through her past. We jump timelines quite often, and we learn a lot about all of the characters on this boat that she's on as well. And I just thought that this again made me feel really, really deep, complex emotions, to the point where I don't actually know for sure what I was feeling. I was just feeling a lot of things, when I was reading this, and I just thoroughly enjoyed everything that this was doing, and I enjoyed the journey that it took me on, even if it was a tough one. And I, again, felt angry for a large portion of reading this book, mixed with lots of other things as well. And I think this did great, just being a like quiet story that had a big punch. So those are all of the books that I have given 5 stars so far this year, and I'm excited for the second half of the year. I'm excited to see what it brings. I typically have more 5 stars in my second half of the year because like fall reading is my vibe. That's where I jam out the best. But thanks so much for watching this video. Let me know if you've read any of these. Let me know if you have any recommendations similar to these, and I'll see you in another video soon. Bye.